dressing, the whole caboose for that. But in 1863, Lincoln called for 2 days of Thanksgiving. One was in August to express thanks for the Union victory at Gettysburg, and the other one was a general day of Thanksgiving for the last Thursday of November. By 1890s, nearly every state celebrated Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of November. But then in 1939, the country was still crawling out of the Great Depression. And of course, the retailers were very concerned that with Thanksgiving coming at the last Thursday of the month, which at that year in 1939 was November 30th, they would only have 20 days of shopping day until Christmas. So Thanksgiving was not only a holiday in its own right, but it was also the beginning of Black Friday, the Christmas shopping season at that point. Now, FDR, back in the 1940s, he called for the holiday to be moved to the fourth Sabbath. Now, the Republican-controlled states protested the change. They didn't want to do that. So, with only 48 states at that time, 23 states celebrated it on the fourth Thursday. 23 states celebrated it on the last Thursday, but there was only 2 states that celebrated both days, the third and the fourth. So, but in November of 1941, just before Pearl Harbor, FDR signed legislation officially making Thanksgiving the fourth day Thursday of November. Now, on Thanksgiving, as we were talking, we gather together around with our family and friends to have the traditional Thanksgiving dinner. But as we're sitting there, our hearts are overflowing with thanksgiving for all the ways God has blessed us. Then before the sun rises the next morning, what do? We are driving like maniacs to the best sale so we can fight our brothers and sisters tooth and nail for the greatest discount on televisions, toys, videos, and clothing. Now, it's amazing how quickly the attitude of Thanksgiving can give way to unadulterated greed. I don't think that it's merely a coincidence that Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving. The devil doesn't want us to dwell on how blessed we are, and he certainly doesn't want us to remember who blessed us. I can almost hear Satan saying, go on and have your day of Thanksgiving, but that's it, only one day, and then it's back to business as usual, where pride and selfishness rules the hearts of men. So you see that he knows that one day of thankfulness has been won. Now, Charles Dickens wrote once, he said that we are somewhat mixed up here in America. He told an audience that instead of having one Thanksgiving Day each year, we should have 364 days of Thanksgiving. And then to use that one day to complain and gripe, and use the other 364 days to thank God for the many blessings he has showered upon you, which makes sense, Use that one day to gripe about it. But as Dickens suggested, we should not wait for a special holiday to express our gratitude to God. Instead, Thanksgiving should be a part of our daily lives. In fact, the Bible is very clear that Thanksgiving is perhaps one of the most vital characteristics of any child of God. And there's good reason for that. So let's open our Bibles to Romans 1, verses 18 through 25. Again, is Romans 1, 18 through 25. Yes, Romans 1, 18 through 25. Okay? So it says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and birds and animals and creeping things. So as you think about this, we know that God created all beings here. We remember the 7 days that God took in order to create every single animal and plant that we have. And because he did that, we should be grateful. We should be thankful. We should be able to honor him and show the world that it's because of this that God loves us so much that he gave also his son. So, that's one thing to think about. So God gave them up in the lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. And, when you read that, which is true, we see so many people that do not worship God, they worship other things. And even when we believe in Christ and we say we worship God, we use other things as idols. And I'm at fault too. I use my phone a lot. And my tablet, I use it a lot when I should be spending more time with the Lord. Now, just as the Apostle Paul is indicating here, countless people who once knew God or had a relationship with Christ will be ultimately lost in large part back because of lack of thanksgiving. So today we are going to see what the Bible has to say about the importance of thanksgiving in the Christian life and learn how we can cultivate this essential mindset that many refer to as an attitude of gratitude. As we just read, failing to glorify and give thanks to God for all he has created can cause our hearts to be darkened. For the life of me, I can't understand evolutionists, nor people who believe in the Big Bang Theory. Now, how can anyone behold this unbelievably beautiful planet and see the creatures that share it with us and then say, there is no God? How can they say that? But as we look at nature and we see the most incredible things God has created in the world, we are exposed as we venture outside or by watching events on the internet or television of the most beautiful sights we have ever seen. I mean, on my computer screen, every time I look at it, there's something beautiful, some kind of background. It may be the ocean, maybe the desert, but it's amazing what the Lord has created and how beautiful it is. We may think negatively towards some of the areas, but when you see it in reality, it's just something that blows your mind completely. So, but many times we don't appreciate, nor are we thankful of what God has given us on a daily basis. So let's open our Bibles to Psalms 19, verse 1 through 4. And for some reason, my computer did something to it, so let me look. Whoa. Okay, let me look for it. Yes, Psalm 19, 1 through 4. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. And we'll read it together and see what it says here. Sorry about that. Okay, Psalms 19, 1 through 4 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words do the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. So I ask you today, have you been blessed? Have you been thankful for those blessings? Have you been blessed and not realized that you've been blessed? I know our family has been blessed on a daily basis, and we are really, truly thankful for the blessings that God has given us. And when we thank him, when we thank God for the blessings, we are also praising him. And sometimes, there are times when we have prayed for something that God has blessed us with, that thing that we're asking, but we forget to thank God because we're so busy, we keep going and going and going. But, we need to stop and think, what was it that I prayed for? Why did I ask him for that? And once we understand that that is the blessing that we ask for, we need to stop and thank God and tell him, thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you for blessing us, and praise him along the way. Now, Paul says in his letter to the Philippines and the Philippine believers in chapter 4, he says, I believe I'm starting in verse 11, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. So it's Paul's attitude of constant thanksgiving through Jesus Christ that enables him to be content whether he is living in plenty or if he is in want. So I ask you, without raising your hands, how many of us can honestly say that we are content with our station in life? We have plenty of money and material possessions, and basically we want for nothing. I mean, we can honestly say, we're not millionaires, we're not rich, but the money that we have provides our wants and our needs. The fact is that very few Americans are content with their financial situation, and we see it. We see this major problem because it tends to be in an area in our neighborhood, in our lives, and the major problem is that we tend to withhold our tithe to God. Why? Because we want to live according to the Jonases. We want to have what they want. We have the desire to want what they need, they have. But by withholding God's tithe with that mentality, God won't bless you. Because, he blesses you for what you need and not what you want. He knows what we need. What we want is an extravagance, and he knows that is an extravagance. It is not a necessity that we need. So there's a reason, again, for the lack of contentment. And we went through that. It's known as the Jonases, and we know them. And they are the family that has everything that you don't have but want. And we find it very difficult to be content. Much less thankful when the Jonases seems to have so much more than we do. There may be times when we complain that we don't have enough money, or we complain of things we don't have or need. But then don't we catch ourselves at times and realize that God knows exactly what we need? He provides us with a roof over our heads. We do have a roof over our heads. We have food on our table. May not be the most extravagant meal that we have, but we have food on our table. We have clothes on our backs. It might not be a name brand type of clothing, but we have clothes. We have clothes. And he supplies us with our needs again, but not with our wants. The problem is that we are too rich in this country. And people see that that everybody has their own phone, they have their own computer, and they have all these luxury things. But even in the middle of the economic crisis, we do have so much. The fact is that we don't have the best of everything. We tend not to acknowledge or appreciate what we do have. So don't allow Satan to lure you into a trap of discontentment. Think about it. Isn't that basically what happened to Lucifer? Think about it. He wasn't content with his position. He wanted to be up there with Jesus and God. He wanted to raise his throne above the throne of God. The problem is that we are too rich. Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote that twice. Sorry about that. Let me go on. Paul wisely said, but goodliness with contentment is great gain. And we find that in 1 Timothy 6:6. In fact, I would say that godliness cannot exist without contentment. Greed is the opposite of contentment. It is the refusal to be satisfied. Greed is always focused on what you don't have rather than the blessings that you do have. In order to cultivate a thankful heart, it is essential that we see our situation from the proper perspective. Paul says that we should give thanks in all circumstances. The only way we can do that is to see life, and especially the struggles in life, the same way Paul saw them. In Romans 8:18, he says, I consider that our present suffering are not worthy comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. And then also in 2 Corinthians 12:10, he says, that is why for Christ's sake I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardship, in persecution, in difficulties. For when I am weak, that's when I am strong. And Philippians 1:12 says, now I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. Now keep in mind that these statements are coming from a man who was beaten multiple times. He was betrayed by his friends, stoned and left for dead. He was shipwrecked, bitten by venomous snakes. He was imprisoned. He was attacked by a mob, blinded by the light, and suffered from what he called the thorn in his flesh. All these things happened in his life after he met Jesus. And when I think about how difficult Paul's life turned out to be, even down to his death for Christ, we must be reminded of how Jesus told Ananias just after Paul's conversion, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. And suffer he did. He did. But he had the right perspective in all of his sufferings. He never gave up. Now, Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 16 through 18 the following. He says, we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but we're not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. Verse 16 says, therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and monetary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. I don't know what kind of struggles or hardships we might be facing right now, but I can tell you that none of our problems are bigger or more powerful than God or the love he has for you. Despite our circumstances, I urge you to heed the advice of Apostle Paul and find cause to be thankful. So count your blessings. Show God by your actions that you are thankful for how he has worked in your life, for all of the ways he has poured out blessings upon blessings. If you are especially blessed financially, give generously to those who are not. If you're blessed with good health, be compassionate with those who may not be so blessed. And if you are overjoyed with the same relationship you currently have with Jesus, introduce him to someone who doesn't know him. And the best way to thank God for the blessings in your life is simply to be a blessing. And I noticed that when we bless someone financially, well, the majority of the people that bless somebody financially are those that are in need. I know that a lot of the rich people do give, and they share their wealth with the needs of other people. But I've noticed that someone, just like my neighbor, when Carlos was unemployed there for a while back in Rockford, we were running low on groceries, and they lived by, monthly paychecks on the Social Security, and she supplied us with it was just a few groceries, but it was enough to help us through that rough time. And we see that a lot. We may not make a lot of money, but as we do share our struggles, we share our blessings with others. Now in Philippians 4, 6 through 8, it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, and will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, and whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent and praiseworthy, think about such things." Now, Paul counsels us to give thanks in all circumstances, and we are to be anxious or worried will not prevent disaster in your life. It actually invites it in. So as we look at Paul wisely, as we see what he's doing, he says in 1 Timothy 6 says, "But godliness with contentment is great pain." I would say that godliness cannot exist without contentment. Greed, again, is the opposite of contentment. Now, Paul counsels us to give thanks in all circumstances, and we're looking for at some unbelievable blessing. Granted, different ones are blessed who are in different areas than others, but one thing I hope we all have in common is that we are blessed with the assurance of the return of Jesus Christ. And when he returns, we are told the old order of things will pass away, and God has promised that he will make all things new. Now, I have a story that I want to share with you. And it tells us that one of the things to be thankful and generous is seeing that everything belongs to God. And George Laurie's book, he wrote an illustration in A Time to Worship. And he tells about a story of a woman who had finished her grocery shopping and returned to her car, and she found that there were 4 men in her car. So she dropped her shopping bags. She drew out her handgun from her purse, and she said with a forceful voice, she said, "I have a gun, and I know how to use it, so get out of the car." The men, they got all scared. They didn't wait for a second invitation. They got out, and they ran like crazy. And the woman was, of course, shaken because, there was 4 men in the car. So she quickly loaded her bags into the car, got into the driver's seat, was trying to put her key into the ignition, and couldn't put it in. She couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And then she looked to the left, and she saw, lo and behold, there's her car, 4 cars down from where this blue car is. So she got out. She looked around to see that the men weren't around and loaded the bags into her own car, and then she drove to the police station to turn herself in. Now, the desk sergeant, after hearing her story, he was laughing uncontrollably. I mean, he was just rolling around. And he pointed to the other end of the counter, and there were the 4 men that she got out of the car, and they were reporting a carjacking by a woman with glasses and curly white hair, less than 5 feet tall and carrying a huge handgun. Therefore, no charges were filed against the lady. But you see how God works in miracles. He makes us laugh, knowing that even though we make mistakes, we can be thankful for the outcome of the incident. Okay, guys, let's